Hi, everyone. I am Hairston-Chase. I am a sociology major, and I'm under the mentorship of Dr. Harmony Newman. And my project is called I'm the Alpha, Negotiating Black Manhood under the Aegis of Hosting Podcasts, a Systemic Media Analysis. And this is my proposed study. So I'm just starting out. This is a quick overview on basically the literature, things that I've looked at so far. These are like the main themes that I've seen come out of it. So I want to talk about a little bit about Black masculinity in particular, hegemonic masculinity and masculinity theories, symbolic interrationalism and social construction, identity construction, podcasting and online echo chambers, and systemic oppression. And we'll get further into all of those as we go on. So starting off, I want to start off with talking about social construction and symbolic interactionalism, since those are really important for understanding what identity construction is. So social construction is basically just the belief in sociology that our realities are socially constructed. We understand them through our interactions with other people, and that they change over time and space, our understandings of the world. And then symbolic interactionalism in particular is talking about how people interact with the symbols around them rather than the physical world itself. So the apple might seem kind of random. I'll explain. So I use an apple because I think it's a very physical, tangible thing. We all know what an apple is. However, interacting with it in different spaces might mean different things. For example, if your friend hands you an apple, you will probably see that as food. You'll probably just eat that apple. It doesn't have a lot of significance to you. You're probably going to see it as we all would probably say we see an apple as food. But let's say you go to a concert and a celebrity you love hands you an apple. Are you as likely to just grab it and eat it? Probably not, right? Now it's a symbol of that interaction. It's exciting. You might want to preserve it in some way. Now the apple has different meaning. So even though the physical thing is the same, the meaning you have and the meaning you understand from it can be different. So we can apply this to gender and race for my project. Both gender and race do have physical markers, things that we consider to be what makes up gender, what makes up race, how we understand it, how we interact with each other. But most of those things are socially constructed, basically all of them, right? Gender does not actually, it's not just an essential thing that exists. It's how we interact with the world. It's the practices that we have. We perform gender in everyday life. We show people our gender through our interactions, through our practices. Same with race. So then talking about hegemonic masculinity and masculinity in general, hegemonic masculinity is a term coined by Raewyn Connell, a sociologist, and basically it's the overarching theory that a lot of sociologists use to understand masculinity, where masculinity exists on a hierarchy. So basically at the top here would be the hegemon. The hegemon can be embodied by actual people, but it is also like an aspirational ideal of what manhood should be. In the US context, that is typically a white, cis, straight, high socioeconomic status, able-bodied man. So the hegemon is not really available to the majority of men. Even if they meet some of those standards, they might not meet all of them. And so it's more of an ideal than anything else. Everything else on this hierarchy is kind of attempting to be that in some way, or at least they have the pressure to attempt to be that. So then under that would be complicit masculinity. Complicit masculinity is where a lot of men would fall into, because it's basically, they're not necessarily challenging the norms that create masculinity, but since they don't meet every standard, they cannot access the powers that the hegemon has. They'll probably have some power, not all of it. And it also is being complicit in the subordination of other men and women, while not maybe actively engaging in that subordination, or at least not intentionally. And then marginalized masculinity is where I think my study focuses mostly, because Black men are going to be in this column. They could be in other ones too, but marginalized masculinity basically means that you're privileged by your masculine identity, but you're marginalized by some other identity. So this could be your like disability or ability status, your race, things like that. So Black men are marginalized by their Blackness, even as they are privileged by their masculinity. Subordinated masculinity more falls into the column of failed masculinity, like failing the norms of masculinity. So you could be a white cisgendered man, for example, but if you enact a lot of feminine qualities, a lot of queer men also fall under this because of assumptions, stereotypes, or actual embodiments that are just in some way not meeting that ideal, and so fall into this category of subordinated masculinity. And then at the bottom is women, unfortunately. I think we all know why that might be. And so my focus, again, is mostly on that marginalized masculinity column. That's where a lot of the theories about Black masculinity in particular are kind of focused. And so the other part of my study is talking about alpha male identity. This is something that has existed for a long time, but I feel like the exact way it's existed is kind of an emerging concept in recent years. And this is an image I got from the internet. So this is what a lot of Black men would, men would say that alpha male identity is. And something I wanted to highlight on this list is social power. If we think about what I just talked about marginalized masculinities, we can understand that in general, Black men might lack some social power. Yet that is on the list of the characteristics of alpha male. And so something I want to look at in my study is how they can make these two things that may seem opposed congruent with one another through their conversations about their identities. So then the other main thing that we need to tackle for my study is podcasting. And I want to talk about the effect of echo chambers. So podcasting has been studied, but it's been studied less about the actual content of the podcast than viewership. So there's been a lot of studies that I've looked at that looked at viewer expectations of podcasts, how many people are viewing podcasts, that type of thing, but less that focus on hosts and less that focus on the actual content of the podcast. So I'm hoping to bring some of that into the conversation. I also think it's a really important mediator for identity construction because it's literally like an hour of people just talking about themselves, talking about who they are, what they think, what they like, what they think you should think of them. It's very clear that they're doing that, like, how are you supposed to see me for an hour? And so it's really good to be able to look at that. And then I want to talk about the effect of echo chambers. So the internet, because of things like algorithms, when you start viewing something, it gives you more of the same thing. Most people exist in kind of pockets on the internet where they're getting similar information over and over and over again, and their beliefs are being reinstated by that. So over and over again, they're interacting with the same people. The hosts are interacting with their viewers who are saying, this is a great take. Then the hosts are like, great, I'm going to keep doing that. And so it creates a situation where they're not having their beliefs challenged very frequently. And if it is challenged, they have a built up sense that this is the right way to go about things. Not saying anything about if it is, but just that that exists. So that brings me to my research question, which is how do Black men negotiate their masculine identity, considering systemic oppression and stereotype as alpha male podcast hosts? And then what then is the relationship between alpha male identity and the effects of systemic oppression? So I want to look at specifically how they talk about their masculinity, how they talk about their Blackness, how they talk about being an alpha male, what that means to them, and how they're explaining that through podcasts. And I think that this is really important because understanding identity construction as both a reflection and creation of social norms is essential for dismantling oppressive systems, seeing them for what they are, seeing them for what they can do. And that helps to not limit the full human experience, having people be able to identify themselves without barrier. So my methods is that I'm going to be analyzing 3 podcasts, 4 episodes per podcast. And I will be searching in the key term high value man and Black high value man. The reason I got to this was because I originally was going to search Black alpha male. When I searched this, I got almost exclusively reaction or commentary videos, not the videos themselves. And so I wanted to eliminate a bias of being like just people being like, I hate this, and that's all that we're getting, and instead getting the original posters and what they are talking about, and that yielded better results. Once I select those podcasts based on how the podcasts that elicit the most results from the YouTube algorithm, I chose to use the YouTube algorithm because I think that it shows like what a casual viewer is going to be seeing without doing a bunch of digging. I'm going to use these three search terms: alpha male, high value, and Black within the actual channels, and then picking based on highest viewership. And then I will do thematic coding and analysis using social theory to look at how they're talking about this and do cross checks with my mentor. So warning for some offensive language in this slide. But this is an example quote of something I might use in my data. This is from the Fresh and Fit podcast. I don't know if any of you are familiar. It's kind of popular, but also like maybe not. So the first line is from Fit. He says, I mean, hey, bro, if you want to date a bunch of Shaniquas, go for it, man. And Fresh says, LaQuisha's. He's laughing. Fit then says, yeah, me and Fresh don't get down with the brown like that. We're not night riders. Fresh then says, nah, I'm good. And then Fit says, you know, sometimes if they're like, I'm not going to say that term because it's an offensive term for mixed people. But like in general, me and Fresh don't dabble in the dark, if you know what I'm saying. I think this is an important quote because it points out two things. One, they're reifying their masculinity by talking about women, talking about their relationship with women, what they're into, what they're not into. Women's perspective is not included in this. And the other thing that's happening is they are distancing themselves from Blackness. So by talking about, oh, we're not down with the brown, as Black men, is very interesting because it makes them seem less Black by comparison, which they've been told. And so I just think that's interesting to like look at that distancing. And then, yeah, I just think this is important because it just looks at how identity is constructed and why those things are happening so we can better our systems. Yeah. Thank you. And then I'm open to questions. So many. Yes. Okay, so Fresh and Fit will definitely be one of them. I have a list, a like preliminary list of ones that I've seen, but I'm just getting my proposal like approved, so I haven't actually gotten to like fully decide my sample. But I think I'm definitely going to include that one because it comes up a ton. Yeah. Other in the back. You, clipboard. Yes. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So for your first question, the literature I did find that talked about alpha male identity only almost exclusively talked about white men. So I feel like it's very understudied to look at people of color within that. I think that there are definitely differences. I haven't gotten into the super specifics of the differences because I'm not necessarily for this study interested in the white perspective, but I think that it would be a good comparison at some point. And then for your other part of your question, what was it again? Sorry, I remember. But I don't. Oh, private versus public. Yeah. So I think that looking at private would be interesting. And I thought about extending this project later to do like interviews with maybe viewers of the podcast to look at their perspectives. But for right now, I thought it was really interesting to look at the public like section of it and to like see how people are like actually presenting themselves like very publicly. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't, my goal is not to just talk about things that might be seen as problematic. I want to get like the whole perspective of like just themes that they're talking about in terms of masculinity and blackness in general, not specifically problematic or what people would call toxic. So I hope that I have a combination of all the things. I don't want to leave anything out. If they're doing really great things, I want to highlight that as well.